Hey Daystar, so welcome to the Valley of Elah. Some of y'all have been here with me before. If you haven't, this is where David and Goliath fought. We're standing right in the middle of the field right now. Behind me on that hill that you can see in the background, that's where the Israelite armies would have been lined up, waiting for the battle for 40 days as they camped out. Goliath would have probably stood almost exactly where we are, somewhere within just a few yards of here, is where Goliath would have stood and shouted up, to the hill above and taunted, the Israelite soldiers up there. The Philistine armies would have been on hills almost as dramatic as those back there behind the camera that you can't quite see. So the Philistines were back there, the Israelites were behind me. Goliath and David would have fought somewhere literally within just a few yards of me, somewhere very close. We don't have an X on the spot, but it's in this valley right about in the middle, which is where we are. So that's pretty cool. So I wanted y'all to see that because a lot of things sort of kind of come clear when you stand here. One thing that really comes clear is it makes you understand why the Bible says they camped and looked at each other for 40 days. I always wondered before I came to the Holy Land, I came to Israel, I wondered, why would two armies just camp and look at one another and not fight? What were they doing? And what is clear when you stand here is exactly what they were doing, which is that the Israelites had an amazing defensive position back there on that ridge line, and it was going to be very difficult for the Philistines to attack it. The Philistines also had a very good defensive position on the other side of the valley, and so it was going to be very difficult for them to have their position attacked. And so they both wanted this valley. As you sort of look around, what you see is this valley is incredibly fruitful and arable, and there's fruit trees and farming going on even till now. They wanted this valuable piece of agricultural land. They both had defensive positions, and they were kind of arguing over it back and forth. Well, then in the middle of all that, Goliath decides he's going to come out here and sort of tempt the Israelites to come down. Okay, so he comes out in the middle of the valley, and he's shouting up at the guys on the hill, taunting them, and all this kind of thing. And another thing that's really cool is you have this 3,000-year-old story, but it's so accurate and perfectly preserved. Is that Bethlehem? If you follow that ridge line straight along it, it goes straight to Bethlehem. And so David, on the day in question, would have come right down that ridge line to the Israelite army, and then he saw Goliath down here making fun of God's people, and everybody else was scared of Goliath, and everybody else saw something that terrified them, and they didn't get it, and they didn't understand it, and they wanted to cower, and they wanted to hide. David saw an opportunity, not a problem. He said, "What? If I kill him, I get to marry into the royal family. I get a tax cut. I get all these. Let's go. Let's do it." David wanted to come fight Goliath. Everybody else hid. And what I think you see there, if you just sort of summarize that story in a nutshell, is you see this convergence of what I'm going to call faith and faithfulness. Because David had faith because he knew he was called to be the king. Just the previous chapter in the Bible, he's anointed to be king over Israel. And he's not king yet. And David knows God keeps his promises. So he knows that God's with him. So he has the faith. But you also see David's faithfulness at work. Because you see David had been taking care of those sheep for all those years. And for all those years taking care of the sheep, the weapon of a shepherd was a sling. And he had put in the practice, he put in the work, he put in the hundreds, maybe even thousands of hours of practicing with that sling. With it's just simple leather strap with a rock. But if used properly, it can throw a rock, a fairly large rock, way, way over 100 miles an hour. And so if you're accurate with it, it becomes a deadly weapon. And the problem is the accuracy. You can throw a rock fast, but you're not hitting anything. So, what David did was all those years practicing and practicing out in the field with the sheep, protecting his sheep, defending them against lions and bears, whatever else would run away. His faithfulness prepared him for the moment, and his faith gave him the courage to step out. And I think, to me, when I look at this story, like, what does it teach me as a believer who also wants to fulfill what God has for me? Which is, and it's just like David, on regular boring days where I'm out in the field, or he was out in the field doing a job that seemed like it had no real meaning, he practiced, he worked at his craft, he was faithful to his job, and that prepared him for the moment. And we have to be like that. Regular, everyday days, we have to step up and live as unto the Lord, live that day for God. And then we have to have the faith when the big moment comes to step out and do what he commands us to, which is what David did right here in this field, not too many yards from where I'm standing. because he stepped out. And the Bible says that when it came time to fight, that he didn't just he was more than here. It says he ran toward Goliath, and he had the rock, he had the sling, and we know the story. He let it go. The rock hit Goliath right in the head. And the Jewish people, the Israelites up there on that hill, when they saw David meet the giant champion of the Philistines, they let out a big shout, rah, and they came pouring off of that hill and assaulted the Philistines on the other side. And a big victory was won right here in this place, and it propelled David to becoming a hero for his nation, and eventually the king, fulfilling his destiny. So that was all right here, faith and faithfulness. Bye.